This is the Iron Sharpens Iron movement, sharing insights into the power of people-centric leading.
Hi, this is Jim, and today we welcome to our tribe someone who every day focuses on repaying the trust of his people by helping to teach and inspire others to dream bigger and to achieve more for their companies, themselves, and their families. The CEO of Destiny Solutions and Omni Update, this is Brian Kibby. Iron Sharpens Iron movement is brought to you by N2 Growth, a leader in executive search, leadership development, and talent management. We find and develop the world's best leaders. Learn more about our practice by visiting us at n2growth.com or click on the link in the show notes of this podcast. Brian Kibby, welcome to the Iron Sharpens Iron movement. You know, everybody reading your bio, and I've talked you up quite a bit to our audience. The tribe's excited to hear this conversation for sure. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jim. I'm excited to be here, and I can't wait to dive into everything with you. You're obviously an incredibly talented leader, and I'd love to just have this conversation with you. Excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you too. You know, we used to work together, and I followed your career for years now, and really excited for you to share some of your insights. And we'll just dive right into it. You know, you've been a successful CEO, you know, both in private and public companies. You've had just a continuous record of success. You know, where you've been, you've made it better. So you got to tell me, what's your secret sauce?
Sure, I'll start with this. I've always understood my limits, always. And I wasn't shy about sharing my limits with people. A lot of senior leaders or people who are up and coming to senior roles have a tendency to hide those things. I never did. And then I accentuated my strengths. And so what that allowed me to do was develop this idea and strategy around talent is the only thing that matters. Now, certainly wildly successful people like Warren Buffett, we can all agree has been really successful. He would say capital allocation is number one. I've had this view that talent, culture, strategy in that order, and capital allocation fourth, because we spend ultimately 2/3 or more of our capital on talent. So I understood what my limitations were, and that put me in the position to really understand in order to augment my limitations, I just had to hire really great people. You know what really great people love? They love it when you let them do their jobs and you set them free. So talent is ultimately the only thing that matters. There was a private equity leader who, at one of the largest PE firms in the world I worked with, and after about 6 months working with him, he said, "Kibby, can I say something to you?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "I've never seen this before." And I said, "What's that?" "Your only strategy is talent." And I said to him what I just said to you. I said, "No, it's culture, strategy, capital allocation, but talent's the only thing that matters and that's the only thing that scales." And I went further. I said, "You buy a lot of businesses." He said, "Yes, across a whole spectrum of industries." In every industry, the CEOs and the senior leadership team are typically looking at similar menus of strategic options across a spectrum. So what's the differentiator? Yeah, you got to pick from the menu, right? But you got to hire great talent. So if you're a CEO, for example, and you're responsible for vision, strategy in the end, you're responsible for everything. But let's say that you're kind of off a little bit, right? But you're in the right way. But if you hire awesome people and you show them respect and you give them the freedom to the job, guess what they'll do? They'll fix that strategy with you and for you.
Amen.
Talent's the only thing ultimately that matters. So my secret sauce has been is I'm very aware of my weaknesses and I don't shy away from them. And I know what my strengths are. And my biggest strength is attracting. Anyone can hire people, but can you really attract great talent? And there's a whole DNA, there's a whole work ethic to do that and do it well. And the one last corollary, if you have another question, is I always tell people to be a top performing team. I've hired, for example, thousands of salespeople and district managers and regional managers and vice presidents throughout my career. To be a top performer, you have to be right 90% of the time. I didn't say 100, but 90% of the time on talent. To keep your job, you have to be right 80% of the time.
Huh. So, Brian, how'd you get to this point, though? Like, have you always grown up creating high performing things, even your local basketball team and all those kind of things, or did you have an aha moment somewhere early in your career that said, now I see the importance of people?
Well, I had a number of aha moments. I grew up, my dad was a what's called a full-time National Guardsman. He was a master sergeant. My parents were great people, but they didn't emphasize education in the home. They emphasized get out of high school, get a job, or go to community college. You can live at home for free, but there's no money here to help you out. But they loved us, which is an advantage that a lot of kids don't have. So I didn't grow up with any sort of vision, candidly, about having a very serious career, to be candid with you. I was a theater kid, so I had that advantage because communication skills, as Warren Buffett would say, and he's right, can be everything to a career. So I had that as a foundational background. I did horribly on the ACT. If it was possible to fail that test, I did it. There's probably a statue in Iowa State at the ACT headquarters, but like this dude got like the worst score in history, and look at him today. And then I joined the Army. Literally, my parents had to sign the documents because at that point, I think still today, you have to be 18 to sign on your own. So I joined the Army at 17, had a lot of officers and NCOs. I was just always a good observer. And then there are a lot of people there are people who are really coachable in life, and there are people who aren't. I am really coachable. Even today, I've got a great boss at this company called Riverside Private Equity. He's our chairman and operating partner. Is a hell of a coach. So I don't care. I'm 55. I don't care where you are in your life. Everyone needs a coach, and you better damn listen. So back to the aha moment. It was really my brother Dennis. My brother Dennis is brilliant. He was a West Pointer, Wisconsin honor grad. So about 19 or 20, he said, Brian, you just don't read, man. And you don't read the newspaper, you don't read books enough. And in order to do anything in this life, you better start. And he gave me some tips, and I actually did it. And there's all kinds of information out there today. Warren Buffett says, read 5 hours a day. Senior leaders, the only way to adapt and differentiate yourself in this world is read 5 hours a day. Mike Mai, who you know is a world-class coach and the chairman of N2 Growth, would say most of his CEOs read 4 hours a day. So it's about reading, yes, and watching, but it's about applying. If you see something from a movie or a book, own it and say, I'm going to do that now, and actually apply it to your life. So my aha moment was reading and educating myself like anyone else. And the difference was I didn't go, oh, that's interesting, or that's a good movie. I go, ooh, that's great. I'm going to own that now and apply it to my life. And I'm going to then teach it because there aren't that, I don't have that many original ideas. Most of the things I learned from people like you and others. And I go, ooh, I'm going to own it. Thank you, Jim. Now I'm also going to teach that.
Brian, so give us some insight into some of these early books and movies. You're referring to movies, so I'm assuming that there's a movie that also gave you some of these aha moments. You want to share with the audience about maybe one of the books that was a massive moment for you, or a movie?
I'll start first with newspapers. And
Mm.
it all adds up and it all counts. I read everything from People Magazine to Wall Street Journal to New York Times to newspapers. Now, it doesn't mean I'm reading every article, but I'll go from page to page because it all adds up and it all counts. So I start there, and you do that on a daily basis as a habit. And then there are formative books that I still recommend today. And one is First Break All the Rules by the Gallup organization, and it is fabulous. And I think I read that when I was 23. I'm 55.
Wow.
And there are stories within that I learned so much from. For example, and when I haven't probably read the book in 20 years, but when a book is that powerful and you remember stories that you apply to your life, I'd recommend that you go get it and read it. Example. So what the book did is they looked at hundreds, if not thousands, of leaders from all walks of life, and they tried to look at consistency in data and approach. And I remember a story about this police chief. I think it was in Mississippi, Missouri, or something like that. And the interviewer said, now you pay this particular officer more than yourself, and he's a beat cop. And he said, well, our job as police officers is community. And this officer is the best in the world at building relationships and partnerships within the community. So, yes, he makes more than me because that's our job. So I never forgot those things. And that probably goes back to the talent culture strategy initiative is so there's formative books like that, books like Good to Great. Now, if you have listeners who are more junior in their career, go back and read those books. Good to Great would help to formulate my hiring philosophy. They had examples. They said Procter and Gamble, which we all know Procter and Gamble still today, one of the great consumer products companies. That was they had a minimum for every job, 9 interviews. And they said, hey, listen, if the hiring process isn't hard, the candidate should run from us.
Ha.
So I make every process hard. And oftentimes people when they're recruiting top talent, especially say engineers these days and data scientists who have a lot of options and others, they would say, well, if we haven't put them through that and a project and we make them do this, well, they may go someplace else. And I say, fine, because if they're not willing to put the work in to get the job, once they get the job, how much
Mm-hmm.
work are they going to be willing to put in? Because typically people should be at their best in an interview, and then it drops off some percentage afterwards. So there's early formative books, and then there's always, listen, I know this can be cheesy, but it's just accurate. The Zig Ziglars of the world, the Tony Robbins of the world, the Brene Browns, they say almost the same things, and they're all correct. All of them. And the Margaret Dwyers of the world who wrote Growth Mindset. It is about habits, it is about mindset. And so go to any of those motivational gurus and listen because they're generally pretty right and they say the same things. Put one foot in front of the other, and almost no one does. Take actions and steps and don't move forward until you do it. And almost no one does statistically. So if you follow them as well, there's just a wealth of information out there. And especially with podcasts today, what we're doing here, there's just so many people. So I would say to people, find people who reach you in a different way and follow them, whoever they are, and start to act upon the things that you read and listen to. So it's not just the books, it's everything today. Podcast, Instagram, it's just LinkedIn every day. It's just, but form a habit, spend a couple hours a day learning. 4 if you'd like, but at least a couple hours.
That's right. I love it. So I see you on LinkedIn very actively too. Do you believe you mentioned it, but do you believe that it is an important platform for you as a leader?
LinkedIn is the most important platform right now for business.
Hmm.
And it is a very important platform for attracting talent. And I'll give you, and for sharing and for giving back, it's an incredibly important platform. And I'll give you an example. So I mentioned earlier on that anyone can hire people, but can you attract? So let's say that you and I were going after the same talent. It could be an engineer, it could be a chief sales officer, it could be anyone. So what's the first thing that a competent person is going to do when they're about to interview with you? They Google you. And then they're
That's
going to
right.
go then they're going to go to your LinkedIn. And then they're going to see what's out there in the general environment about you. So if they go to my account, they can see on LinkedIn, I give back to the community. I I do my best to teach. I do my best to share, which requires effort. Then they go to my Twitter account where I have 8,500 tweets that I've written myself throughout the years, and they can see everything about me
Hmm.
and even more. Then they go to YouTube. And then if they go to you, Jim, which I know there's a lot about you, including a book written about you, but if there's not, and they go, well, there's nothing here about this Jim guy, but this Brian guy, I know exactly who this dude is. I won.
Yep.
I won before the game even started. So back to the question about LinkedIn. Yes, LinkedIn is very important to giving back. One of the problems with social media, well, that's not really a social media, but a platform like that is people like to take. And I would say a significant number of people on LinkedIn, they take. They connect you. Oh, and then they try to sell you something. You have to earn the right with LinkedIn. This is just, you have to earn the right to ask for something. And earning the right on LinkedIn, which is why I think it's so important. There's so much great information there, especially about whatever industry you're in. But you earn the right to attract people and to ask people to partner with you and so on and so forth. So back to yes, LinkedIn is an incredibly powerful platform to teach, to attract talent, and also remember as a senior leader, people want to be proud of. I'm going to use the word boss, but I know it's not. But people want to be proud of the leaders that they work with. And so, if a leadership is empty and is not out there in the public domain, well, why? How do you not do that in the modern day? So it's a retention tool too, because people want to be proud of, Sally or Jack or whoever's on LinkedIn or wherever they are, saying that's my woman, that's my guy. I follow that person. That's why I joined that company. If you don't, well, you might lose. So yes, LinkedIn's incredibly important.
Yeah, fantastic points, Brian. And it's pretty interesting too. I think you bring up a very valuable point that, one of the classic things they always teach in leadership, right, is that as a leader, you live in a glass house, right? You're always judged, you're always observed, and those things have consequences. You're bringing the point to not only do you live in the glass house, but you can exploit it for good. And there's absolute strategic advantage to that.
Absolutely. And also with LinkedIn, I'm going to keep on all the social platforms. Give freely with no expectations of anything ever in return. And if you can do that and do it authentically, almost always you get something in return. But give back with no expectation of anything in return. And the most valuable thing that we have to offer anyone is our time and our expertise. And we all like to teach in the end. And so anyway, so just give back freely, and then you'll get something in return. I think there's the book called The Secret that basically that's the premise of that book, and it's a pretty darn right premise.
And you're referring though even beyond LinkedIn, really, from that point,
Just in
right?
life,
Do
yeah,
you
just
give freely in life?
everything, LinkedIn. Um, there's always time to have conversations with people, coaching conversations inside and outside your industry, just with forward planning, and just keep the commitments. Like you said, hey Brian, do you want to do this podcast with me? I said absolutely. We just forward plan it, make it happen. So if there's someone who wants your time, sometimes you plan it 6 weeks in advance, give them 15 minutes, and you never know what that turns into. I have a former intern. His name is Ben Birnbaum. He's now a partner at Keyframe. He was my partner. He was my intern when he was 18, and he's now one of the most important parts of my life.
Wow.
Super talented guy. We do visioning sessions together and all kinds of really important things. And I just say, hey, this is a talented young man, and I'm going to give freely to this guy with no expectations of anything in return. And now he's one of my best friends. But also, I learned from him. He's 31 years old, tremendously successful, and I've learned as much from him as anyone else. And that was just from saying, "Hey, smart young kid, sure, I'll, give me 100 get Twitter followers. This is 15 years ago, whatever it is, and yeah, I'll give you an internship." And he went to his fraternity and said, "Hey, I want to get an internship. We need to get this guy 100 Twitter followers in the next 3 hours." And that's exactly how it went down. So then he became one of my most important guys. So there's stuff, just do that a lot, sprinkle it everywhere, and you almost can't lose.
Yeah, amen to that. I used to teach in the military. I used to teach senior leaders. I was like, never make somebody feel like they're not important. A lot of times these senior leaders, they're going from one important meeting to another important meeting, and when they're walking the hallways or going across the parking lot, and somebody's like, "Hey, got 2 seconds? I got a question for you." And many of them just brush right past those people. And it's just the exact opposite thing to do. As a leader, you need to stop, look that person in the eyes, and make them feel that they are the most important person for that moment in time. And it is amazing the amount of payback you get in just good aura that comes out of good leaders that practice those
You
simple
got that right.
techniques.
Now you mentioned something. You mentioned the word time, because they're
Hmm.
these senior military leaders or CEOs or whatever, moving from meeting to meeting. And as we grow up in our careers, we're moving from meeting to meeting. I have a very good friend. Her name is Lisa. She's a very successful agency called Partners in Publishing. And she said to me the other day, and I've known her for about 22 years, she said, "BK, can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." She said, "You never seem to be that stressed about your schedule."
Hmm.
And I said, "Well, it's about time management, as you know. And so you have to block out in this world today where open calendar access and all those good and both crazy things. You have to block out time in your schedule to think. You have to block out time in your schedule. And so what that means is there's plenty of time to forward plan it. With forward planning, you can do everything. But yes, I am focused on my schedule. And just like anything else, there are certain things that are create more pressure. But
Hmm.
yeah, I am in control of my calendar. And
Such an important lesson,
I'm in
Brian.
control of my calendar.
I think the earlier that people can learn that fundamental lesson, the more advantage they will get later in their lives. I am a victim of that. When I was a senior leader in the military, I used to take pride. I used to show people screenshots of my calendar, and it was booked in 15-minute increments, right? And it was just packed. And see, I'm important, and it took me time afterwards, and now working with other civilian senior executives to realize how much of a train wreck that was and how much I was actually failing my team that I loved because I wasn't booking enough time to just think, to slow down, to actually go faster. And it is just a valuable lesson that is a foot stomper, I guess, on this podcast.
Well,
That if you are a young leader today listening to this, take heed of that advice.
let me tell you. So the premise of this is for me at least, talent's the only thing that scales, the only thing that matters. So how do you create time for that? And also in terms of a tip in terms of managing your schedule and owning it and taking control of it, timeliness. People can teach you the way that you allow them to. Even when I was in the military, even when I wasn't a senior person, if someone made me wait and was not timely, like they were the queen
Yep.
or king of Sheba, I did not tolerate that. There's
Yeah.
there's a way to do that. There's a way to do that. But I'm on time 99.99% of the time. And if not, I will let you know. And
And
I don't care if it's an intern or wherever, you show people that kind of respect. And when you have that kind of habit around timeliness, what happens is you then have more control over your schedule. So there's that habit of timeliness that is just essential to success in life. John Wooden, who was the coach of the UCLA Bruins, has 11 national championships on 60 Minutes. I think 15 years ago, he was being interviewed, and he was known as the spiritual guru and all this incredibly successful coach. And he was asked, "What's the most essential thing to leadership in your success?" And he just said, "Timeliness, being on time, being on time."
love it.
And then he went on to say, "Well, when you show up early, you settle your mind, you show respect to your teacher or your coach or your boss." It's a whole litany of things. But anyway, it goes back to if you can control your time, it gives you more time to focus on the things that are most important. And if you want to be a leader, the most important thing to my eye is talent, full stop. So it gives me more time to invest and give back to my team and prospective employees and other kinds of things.
Yeah, fantastic advice. I grew up on the Lombardi rule, staying with sports analogies. Vince Lombardi had the rule of you have to show up 15 minutes early is on time. And by growing up in that rule, you just seem to never be late. And it's amazing too that you start to become very aware of people that don't value time, right? And they show up 15, 20 minutes, half hour late, and they're like, well, the meeting was scheduled at 9. I'm here at 9:30. Let's go. And they just don't value time. It's
Mhm.
amazing how people expose themselves like that.
Well, I had and sometimes leadership, as you know, is about theatrics. So I took over this company a long time ago, a very large family held company. And we had a very senior leader who was ultimately the chief sales officer. And when I joined the company, we talked about timeliness and we talked about non-negotiables.
Hmm.
And someone said, "You will never get XYZ to be on time for any meeting." I said, "Huh, that's so strange." So had a senior leadership team meeting the next day, and lo and behold, XYZ was 15 minutes late. But guess what? The door was locked.
Nice.
And so
Yes.
XYZ was never late again. So
Point taken.
you get that. Well, anyway, so the talent, gives you more time to do those things. And the quick thing about talent, my daughter, who's 19, she's a freshman at Miami of Ohio, and she said, "Dad, what are you going to do today?" I said, "What I do every day, Kate. I give people permission and room to do their jobs." So back
Hmm.
to the whole premise of talent, everything I think about every moment of every day is how do I work with my team to set their talents free and not do their job for them.
I love that. And that's really, setting talent free, that's starting to really sidestep into culture, right? I mean, that's what you're really talking about. Like,
Yep.
not only you're developing this talent, but now you're building the culture within your organization.
Well, culture, again, it's talent, culture, strategy in that order, but they're all equally important. Capital allocation, fourth, all very, very important. And go back to culture. So if people know that the tone from the top is the talent is the only thing that matters. So what happens then is people start to feed it. They start to professionally develop it. They start to create an environment where there's a lot of joy. Because if people aren't laughing in an organization on a pretty regular basis, you probably have a culture problem. So what
Hmm.
happens is if they can see that the tone from the top is talent, we attract it. We pull out every stop. If we know that there's a talented person available to us, we move heaven and earth to bring that person here. And then once you bring that person here, you have to keep that person here. So then you move right to retention. Is it a joyful environment? Do you resource, not unlimited resources, but do you resource appropriately? Do you give people freedom to do the job? Is coaching a part of everyone's fabric? All those things are just fundamentally important and they lead to culture. How do you retain the talent? Well, now everything from culture leads from that. How do you retain it and build a culture around it?
How do you get around this bumper sticker conversation that, well, millennials will never stay with an organization? They're going to change jobs 9 to 15 times in their lives. and they're never really settled. So you just have to feed the fact that they're not going to stick around. So when you view talent the way that you view it in your lens, how do you get around those kind of scenarios?
Well, there's a couple things. I'll start with Richard Branson. And Branson is famous for a lot of things, but certainly for saying, when people say, "Boy, if we invest so much in professionally developing our people and on training programs, things like that, what if they leave us?" And then his response was, "Well, what happens if you don't and they stay?" So my view is millennials or anyone, you have to create an environment that is learning and that's compelling for them. And people stay in companies if they think there's a future, not just for the company, but most importantly for them. And I'm always okay though when people go someplace else. And for talented people who've contributed with a great attitude, I would say you go out and conquer, and you're always welcome back. And I'll give you an example. There's a guy named Nathan Schultz. Nathan Schultz was a sales rep for me a long time ago at Pearson. He's now the number two at a company called Chegg. It's now a $12 billion company. So long ago, it was a book rental company. And he came into my office and said, "Hey, BK, you've been here for 6 or 7 months." I was the head of sales. "And I'm going to go join Chegg." And I asked him a bunch of questions. And I remember saying, "Nathan, go out, try it. If it doesn't work out, you're a really talented young man. You're welcome back." Now he's helped to create thousands of jobs and literally billions of dollars in wealth for investors. So, my what I'm saying to you is, you have to create an environment where people want to stay, and even if they want to stay, but there's a more unique opportunity for them someplace else, you have to be mature enough, authentic enough, and generous enough to say, "You go out, young woman or young man, or whatever stage they are in their career, and you are welcome back." So that's our philosophy. It's a generosity philosophy, and oftentimes people will come back to you.
And it always works best when sincerely given, right? This tone that you're presenting so far, Brian, is really that of a servant leader, right? The giving back of all these things that you've talked about.
Give me back, and there's something that I've always been drawn to you about, Jim, and I know what you've done as a very senior leader, command sergeant major. I don't know if I have that right within the Air Force. I know in the Army it's command sergeant major. I think
Yeah,
it's chief
close
something
enough.
something something in the Air Force. But it's that servant leadership, and people can smell it. And I also come from the view, we're not getting out of this thing alive. We're all dust. So I take you seriously, Jim. I take my investors seriously, my customers seriously, certain my teammates seriously, but I do not take myself very seriously. And people can sense that as well. And within that is freedom. It's freedom for them, it's freedom for me.
I love it. So I can't let you escape, and I want to stay just like on this human talent thing, but you keep referencing back about in particular, I'm a big fan of the power of threes. The three biggest things that you've talked about is talent, culture, strategy. So let's change the conversation just slightly and talk to us about what are you referring to when you say talent, culture, now strategy. Are you talking huge corporate strategy, or what are you saying in the importance of strategy is one of your top three that you're saying, and how do the humans integrate into that?
Sure. So with strategy, there's a lot of different things within that. So as senior leaders, we're responsible for the overall corporate strategy, company strategy, and vision. And then within that, to military terms, right? There are small unit tactics within that. Everyone's building their own team and framework, but as long as your overall vision, your overall strategy, your overall purpose and mission is generally correct, and you give people freedom within that to drive that vision and strategy, it's a winning hand. So that's basically how I view strategy. We're all accountable for it. The CEO is accountable for everything, and certainly strategy. But within that, you have to give people the freedom to check that strategy, even fix it and shape it with you. But ultimately, the CEOs are accountable for it.
Yeah, awesome. So got to ask you, you've got these foundational things that have made you who you are today. What makes you curious right now? What are the things, with all the reading that you've done, with all the experience that you've had, with all the fantastic people you've surrounded yourself with? What's the biggest thing that makes you the most curious right now? What are you envisioning? Where do you see things 5, 10, 15 years?
Well, the thing that makes me most curious right now is I've been in education for the most part, my whole career. And so what made me curious 30 years ago makes me curious today. What makes people tick? What's important to them? How do we help others achieve their full potential? That's the thing that makes me most curious. Now, someone would say, well, in ed tech, isn't it about taking students from learners to earners? Yes, absolutely. But that goes back to full potential. Isn't it about the fact that the 4,200 colleges and universities in the United States have significant pain points? Yes. How do we help work with them to help fix those pain points? But ultimately, it's about how do we, because humans change and adapt, how do we invest and help people achieve their full potential? If I were running a widget factory, I would think about that the same way. How do I get that person who's enormously talented, and almost all of us have incredible talents, to understand how talented they are and set that talent free? So what makes me curious every day is, how do we help each other achieve our full potential? And it's a never ending journey, and it's a fun journey.
It sure is. And I'll tell you this, Brian, it has been a fun journey over these last 30 minutes to just get some insights from a hugely successful senior executive and an amazing person. Brian, thanks so much for your time today, sharing your insights with the tribe. I know that we've all grown and become better for it. So thanks again.
And Jim, thank you. And as always, thank you for your many, many years of service to this country. It matters.
And to you too. My honor. Thanks again, Brian. Thanks for joining our leadership movement this week. Talking to Brian about setting your talent free and watching them flourish is a lesson in the basics of servant leadership. Don't forget, our show notes are posted on the website with key leader takeaways, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast and tell a friend so we can build the tribe. Until next time, remember that iron sharpens iron. Make yourself and others around you better every single day.